Welcome, warriors. Today, I am airing an interview I did with Dr. Lisa Hartwell on her Anxiety Ease podcast, with her permission, of course. She sent me the video to use however I saw fit. And so I wanted to air that for you guys today. I always tell you to grab a tissue and listen in, but I'm not sure any tears will be involved in this episode. Um, you know, but just in case. Let's rock. Does your past haunt you? Maybe you're in a storm that feels like it will never end. Are you fighting a battle that's rendering you hopeless? Maybe you feel like you're fighting alone, but your battle was not meant to be a solo endeavor. You were meant to be a warrior among warriors. My name is Heather, and I grew up thinking my battles were nobody's business until I found myself in an abusive marriage and felt cut off from all avenues of help. In this podcast, you will hear warriors' words. They will tell you of their battles, both won and lost, their journeys, and their lessons learned along the way. But we don't stop there. These warriors will share how they have applied those lessons to go from warrior to survivor to thriver. Whether it's an abusive marriage, illness, mental health crisis, or any number of traumas this world dishes out, these warriors will use their words to help you find the beauty in your broken, move beyond your battles, and become the thriver God created you to be. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. I am grateful that Dr. Hartwell invited me to chat on her podcast and that she gave me permission to air it here. So here's a little more about the Anxiety Ease podcast. The Anxiety Ease Show is an inspiring and educational podcast for overwhelmed professionals and business owners with high-functioning anxiety. Dr. Lisa Hartwell is a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety assessment and treatment, and a coach specializing in high-functioning anxiety. Her podcast combines neuroscience and soul to create more ease, joy, and space in your day-to-day activities, especially during the days when it all seems so hard and situational, high-functional anxiety seems to consume your day. You will feel the difference in knowing how to focus on what needs to be done, making more time for more play, and exploring a deeper meaning of how high-functioning anxiety shows up in your life. Let's illuminate how to embrace and embody a new approach using your high-functioning anxiety as something that can partner with your soul as a guidepost to become your new norm as you evolve in your life, personally and professionally. So before you listen to the conversation I had with Dr. Hartwell, here's a review from Joy Official. Empowering. Heather is so passionate about the topic of surviving trauma. This podcast is so inspiring and uplifting. I love it. Thank you, Joy Official. I am thrilled to hear that my passion shines through, and I love it when these stories inspire others. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Your comments and your star ratings help people find the Warrior Words podcast. It only takes a few minutes of your time, and it helps so much. And I would love to have you join the Warrior Words email list and become an insider for all the latest news. Head to subscribepage.io/pearls of wisdom. And that link. I need a blooper reel, y'all. That link will be in the show notes and you can get on the list today. Now, on to the show.
Aloha, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here again this week to share some pretty fascinating stories again about these high-functioning, highly ambitious women that I love to work with and talk to. But like myself, we all have this sort of thread of high-functioning anxiety that rears its head when we least expect it. And I love just sharing stories. I think it helps us to learn from each other and how we all navigate that. And so I'm super excited to have my guest of Heather today, and I'm going to let her introduce herself in a second. But Heather and I just love the online world, how we all get connected. We met through a mutual group and friends online, and lo and behold, here we are just having an interview and just a talk story today together. So welcome to Anxiety Ease, Heather. Can you share with my audience a little bit about your story, who you are, what you do, and something fun about you?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Hartwell. I appreciate the
Yeah.
invitation to be here today. And like she said, my name is Heather Gaffney, and I'm a new podcaster and a new YouTuber, and so I'm learning a lot about this online world.
Mm,
But in my day job, I'm a virtual assistant, and I have several clients that I work with across the country. And it's never the same day twice,
mm,
and that's what kind of makes it a little fun because I never know exactly what to expect.
mm.
In my personal life, I am a single mama of two young adults who just finished college, and they are my pride and joy.
Mm.
Um, they are actually my introduction to anxiety.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
Yes,
Yeah.
my own
Welcome to
and
that
theirs.
chapter. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, and then something fun about myself. Well, since we recently had the Super Bowl, I can share that I used to work security for the Baltimore Ravens.
Wow, that's
So, yes.
incredible.
And we should have made the Super Bowl, but I'm not salty about that.
Oh boy. Well, this might have to be over because I'm pretty happy the Chiefs won.
Yeah, I'm not, I'm not mad at Patrick Mahomes. I actually like
Yeah.
him. So,
It ended up being a great game, which I always like. At first, I was thinking, oh no, this first half is so boring. Are you kidding? I got all excited and I got all the snacks for nothing. I'm going to be done with the snacks here in about an hour, you know? And then it got really good. So at least it was a good game. So,
it was a very good game. It
mm.
was.
Oh, that's so awesome. What kind of work do you do for the VA job? Do you have a certain clientele that you work with?
I don't. It's a variety.
Mm,
I basically do whatever the client wants.
mm,
And usually that includes things like social media, customer service,
mm.
newsletters, emails, editing. I've edited a few Amazon bestsellers
Nice.
and just whatever they want to train me to do,
Mm.
I learn how to do it and then do it to the best of my ability.
And how long have you been doing that?
This summer will be 9 years.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
incredible. Now, did you start out in your career? Because if it's been 9 years, what did you do prior to that to get into the online space?
Everything.
Yeah.
I sometimes when I talk to people about what I do or what I've done, they say, "Wow, you've really had a lot of jobs."
Mm,
So I mentioned working security, and I've been a nanny.
mm,
That's a dichotomy. I've been a bartender,
mm.
and I've worked for here's a blast from the past. I worked for Bally Total Fitness. I can't
Oh,
even remember when they went out of business.
right. Wow. Uh-huh.
So I've done a lot of different things. I guess I got my degree in education. I have a master's
Mm,
degree in education, and I taught for 3 years,
mm,
and then just decided it just wasn't what I wanted to do.
mm.
And ironically, I homeschooled my children after that. So the education ran through, but
Yeah.
I just didn't do it in a school setting.
Mm. Wow. And then when you think about your life now, working as a VA, is it the freedom? What is it that you enjoy about it the most?
The freedom and the time, the scheduling is
Mm,
probably what I enjoy the most.
mm,
Like I said, no 2 days are ever exactly the same, so
yeah.
there's variety.
Mm,
And because I have multiple clients, I get to do different things for different clients.
mm.
Um, but to be honest with you, it started because I was looking to stay home with my kids.
Ah. Mm,
I was recently divorced,
mm,
and my kids had kind of lost everything. They lost their father, they lost their home,
mm,
and so I wanted to do my best to keep something the same.
Mm,
And so homeschooling was that thread. That was
mm,
the one thing that I could keep the same. And so it was just trying to find something that I could do from home that had that flexible schedule
mm.
and that could still pay the bills.
Right,
So,
which is, we talked about this before, which is the beauty of a podcast. Because once you get rock and rolling with a podcast, it's one of those things that you can do from home and be consistent with it.
right.
And it's a beautiful thing. Can you share folks about your podcast, what yours about, and what's
Okay,
your
it's called,
mission? What's your mission to be out
well,
there in the world?
it's called Warrior Words. And it all started because, and now for some people this may sound a little crazy, but it was because the Holy Spirit told me to do it.
Hmm. And
And
sometimes we listen and sometimes we don't.
and this is a case of both
You're right.
because I delayed it and my first reaction was no, you got the wrong girl here. Because this is a place where my own anxiety comes in, and that is I have always been afraid of microphones and public speaking. And you know, I said on one of my first episodes, it's like I was the girl in the back of the classroom that would sink down lower and lower so that the teacher wouldn't see me.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know how to talk. I was afraid to talk in front of people. And now I own a microphone and run a podcast. So
Yeah, who knew?
who knew? So the mission kind of started because I had written a manuscript
Mm,
about my it's fictional, but it was about my marriage experience, and that was a case of domestic abuse. And so it was kind of born out of sharing stories and the lessons that we've all learned as we go through our various traumatic events in our lives.
mm,
Uh, so that's basically it. It's sharing stories and lessons learned about trauma,
mm.
and then how we go on to use those lessons maybe to help someone else in the future. And that's kind of the goal, is to help someone,
That's
to
awesome.
help someone
And
get through
that
their
is that where
trauma.
the name comes from? Warrior Words?
Warrior words,
That's
yes,
beautiful.
because you
That's
use
beautiful.
your words in your battles and your
I
warriorhood.
love that. I wrote down triumphs. There's very much a theme of triumphs in your we've only been talking for like 7 minutes, and just you have a thread of triumph through your story. It's really amazing. One of the things I was hoping you could share with my listeners, one of the things I like to do is always have us learn from each other. And certainly, I have my certain process that I use for helping folks with high functioning anxiety, but some of that journey is on our own to figure it out. And we learn from each other. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit. First of all, how have you seen high functioning anxiety, because it hasn't been constant with you either, which is sort of indicative of high functioning anxiety versus clinical. How
Right.
have you noticed it thread its way into your life throughout your life? And first of all, and then what did you do about it?
Well, that's a good question.
Mm,
I think I've seen it rear its head in multiple ways. The when you find out that your husband is leaving you, and um, you don't know what you're going to do. Like I
mm,
mentioned, I ended up losing my home, and my kids end up losing their father.
mm,
Um, and that there's a fear. There's a very real fear of going out into the world and what am I going to do? How am I going to take care of my kids? And I think, those are only two of the
mm,
questions. They're big questions,
mm,
but they're only two of the ones that, that just would populate in my head, and I would hear over and over again, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle this? How are you going to make this better for them? How are they not going to end up a statistic?
mm,
I mean, granted, they are a statistic in that we are a divorced family.
mhm,
They are from divorced parents. Um, but they also run the risk of, higher drug use,
Mm,
higher crime statistics. And that was, oh, that was one that kept me up at night. I think I
mm,
would just sit there and just, what am I going to do? How
mm-hmm,
am I going to make this safe for them?
mm-hmm.
Um, so that was a big one. And
Yeah.
then I also, in the year we all love to hate, in 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another one, single parent, and the word cancer.
Mm,
And, am I going to survive? What's going to happen to my kids if I don't?
mm,
And I guess I have mine just manifests a lot in questions. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it?
mm,
And I guess you asked about how I handle those, and I think for me, I turn to prayer, and I turn to
mm-hmm,
my faith life,
mm,
um, because prayer tends to calm me down,
mm,
and prayer helps me to maybe to realize that I'm not alone.
mm.
Um, and then along those lines, social media, there are a ton of good Facebook groups out there. As you mentioned,
Yes.
that's how we met. We met in
Yeah.
a group together. There are a ton of good Facebook groups out there, and other platforms, but where you can find your tribe, and you can
Yeah.
find people who are going through similar anxious, anxiety producing situations,
Mm, mm-hmm.
and again confirm that you're not alone. There are other
Yeah.
people who go through cancer, other people who go through domestic abuse and divorce and
Mm.
raising kids, and
And triumph
so
together.
and triumph.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, amen to that.
It's such a testimony to connection, the importance of connection, and that if we can figure out a way to connect in these times, the anxiety can actually calm down because it knows that you got this. You know that you have the support. You're reaching out for the support. The anxiety is not going to go away until you have some sort of resolution in sight. Otherwise, it's going to just keep
Right.
going. You need to connect. You need to connect. It's that messenger piece of it. Um, I love what you said about your access, your organic, natural way of accessing prayer, which is very akin to what a lot of folks have as mindfulness in their life, which is if we can create that safe, calm space, and how you get there is your modality of prayer, then it's imperative that you do that so you can quiet the mind long enough to get the answers. Because
Right.
you can ask questions all day long, but if you don't quiet the mind, you're not going to hear the answers that are given to you or presented
Exactly.
to us, or um in our connections, that you can be present with other people, but if you're not there also to listen, you just can't hear it. So I
Right.
love that you said that. um One of
If
the
I
things.
could,
Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, no, no.
One of the other things was you were talking about learning from each other, and I think that's the other
Mm,
benefit of that connection when you're in these groups, even when they're just online or whether they're even in person. Um, you connect with people who are either in front of you
mm,
or behind you on that
mm,
path and on that journey, and you're almost always, except for when the moment that it happens, you're almost always at least one step further
mhm,
than somebody else.
mhm,
And so you can help someone else with what you've learned,
mm.
and the people ahead of you can help you with what they've learned.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of these groups. Either way, there's always somebody to help someone else, and you can benefit for someone else's experience.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I was just sharing with you that I spoke at a conference, yes, a business conference yesterday, and one of the topics that I was speaking on for a panel was about the adjustment, the cultural adjustment to hybrid circumstances that still exist as a outgrowth of COVID. And one of the things everyone's talking about is this element of connection. But then the conversation quickly went to this other piece that there was this collective empathy that has never been seen before because we were all going through the same experience together.
Yes.
And yet now people are struggling. That's what the whole panel discussion was about, is how do we get through this with this new norm, with having a hybrid work experience for folks. And it was a very interesting way of hearing folks shift it to, well, I kind of understand you now when you say you actually have kids at home, or you actually have possible things that you need to get done, that you can work from home and do that at the same time. I don't care that you do your work at 10 o'clock at night. You might have some boundaries around that in certain kind of jobs, but other jobs, it's computer work. It doesn't really matter when you do it. So the fact that you need to go in the middle of the day and pick up your kids or do your laundry, and lo and behold, the washer is doing your laundry. You're not all there on the scrub thing doing the laundry, right? You can do your
Right.
laundry
Yeah.
while you're on the computer. Like, it has
Mhm.
changed people's life, and people are more empathic to that. It was a very interesting turn. So I think you're kind of talking that binding piece now, that people really resonate with what that's about, which is when we have that common experience together. Now I understand you more. And not only that, I can, like you said, be either one step ahead or aligned with you, or one step back.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things, if you're comfortable sharing with my listeners, one thing I would love if you could share was this recent experience that you had that, was just last week, actually, because had this scheduled. And then when you emailed me, I was absolutely floored. And here you are, just this amazing functioning woman in front of me here. If you would like to share with them what happened with you, because one of the things, from my previous experience as a nurse, way before as a psychologist, I have a pretty strong medical background, and I understand that you had a bit of a mini stroke last week. And when medical stuff comes up in our lives, I had a hysterectomy last year, and it threw me for a loop. Had some complications from it, and my anxiety was through the roof trying to figure out how I was going to do life in certain ways, and so I wouldn't mind hearing your experience with that. And maybe there's some listeners that can benefit from your experience. And how did you get through that in a week?
Well, yes, that was highly anxiety producing.
Oh,
Um, well, just I'll try to summarize it a little bit, but basically, I experienced some double vision
mm,
where each of my eyes was seeing something totally different, and one of them actually um, turned the
oh,
image. The image was my first indication that something, but it didn't. And I ended up being able to get my doctor on the phone. They said, no, you need to call 911. And so I called 911. They put me through a stroke protocol, started developing some other tingling symptoms that were only on one side of my face.
mm,
So with each, and interestingly, each symptom presented separately.
wow.
So it was 1, 2, 3, 4, because I had a total of 4 symptoms. And so with each symptom, the anxiety went up. It's like, okay,
Mm,
what is going on?
mm,
Um, and so I ended up going to the hospital, got my little chauffeur-driven ride to the hospital with the ambulance, um, and in addition to the medical, I will say another aspect of there were 2 other aspects that influenced my anxiety that day, and one is that I don't have a lot of money. I'm barely paying my bills,
mm,
and so um, even with medical insurance, that's going to cost me a pretty penny. So with
mm,
everything they kept telling me, oh, we need to do this test and that test and this, I kept seeing dollar signs and wondering how I was going to pay for it.
mm.
The other thing, and I hadn't talked about this yet on my podcast, but it's an upcoming episode just at some point. My son is on the autism spectrum,
Mm, mhm.
and he's a young adult, but he has never in his entire life spent a night alone.
Oh,
And he came with me to the hospital in the ambulance. And when they told me I had to stay overnight, the, there were so many anxiety flags at
mm,
that point because he was on a deadline for his YouTube channel. And that's all he was thinking about, was getting
Mm.
his video out to his fans. And I was thinking about, oh my gosh, how am I going to be here and let him go home?
Mm.
And that was probably the hardest thing despite all the medical things and not
Right.
knowing what was going on, my main anxiety was, how is he going to do a night alone?
Mm.
I had to call an Uber. And, I think what I just did was these are the steps. These are
Mm.
the steps I have to follow. And so
Mm.
I tried not to let my emotion. I was not successful. I cried in front of the doctor and my son,
Oh,
of course.
yeah.
But I just tried to be rational and say, okay,
Mm.
step one is we need to get an Uber. Step two is we need
Mm.
to, and we arranged for a communication system. My
Mm.
phone was dying. And so we arranged for a way to communicate. Um, and then I had to put my health, because we had that communication pathway established. I had to put my health first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was tough. That was a very, very tough switch for me.
Mm.
Um, Sometimes I think, well, maybe the umbilical cord has never been cut.
Mm.
But it's hard. He's high functioning autism, but he's on the spectrum and he has his limitations.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so it was a challenge. It was a
Mm.
challenge. But I guess about 30 hours after I went to the hospital, they released me
Mm.
and told me I need to make some lifestyle changes. Uh, but other than that, they told me you should not have any long lasting or detrimental effects from the mini stroke. It's called a TIA, or a
Right.
transient ischemic
Ischemic. Hmm.
attack.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm learning more
Yep.
medical terms by the day. And
Yep.
so the lifestyle changes should be enough to at
Mm.
least keep it away, hopefully, again,
Yeah.
and
Don't
not
you hate it
and
when they
not
give
get
you,
the big one.
don't you hate it when they give you the advice that you could get on a commercial? Eat better, exercise, don't drink, don't smoke. It's okay.
Yeah.
Check, check, check. But I
I
still had a
already don't do these
TIA.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So yeah, it was a very, very traumatic
Oh
experience,
my
and
goodness.
the anxiety was through the roof.
Uh-huh.
Um, but one minute, sometimes 1 minute, one event, one thing at a time,
Yeah.
made it through,
Yeah.
and happy to report my son did fine. No
Yeah, I'm
broken
sure.
bones
Yeah.
and no holes in the wall or anything. So
Yeah.
everything was good. Sometimes anxiety is really weird, because you have all these emotions, and the blood pressure goes up and all these other things, and then you get there after the event and it's like, well, what was I worried about?
Mm. Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
he did fine. He
Yeah.
did great. So very proud of him.
Absolutely. I just got chicken skin when you said that. The worry is so functional because it allows us to be activated.
Mm,
If we don't worry, we don't have any anxiety associated with something that's coming down the pike, we wouldn't be activated. We wouldn't keep things safe. So that's where
right.
the fight,
Yes.
flight, or freeze comes in.
Hmm.
And in those moments, it is so hard to be activated and think clearly, think logically.
Hmm.
And when you have skills such as yourself, you can actually do that. You can actually pull it off. It might take a hot minute, but you can do it. And it's for the folks that it's like your son, for instance. It might say if it would have happened to him, it would have been it's a different ball game altogether if somebody isn't functionally able to manage their emotions in the moment and think logically. I just have so much empathy for you for that. We do have some friends, and as you know, I work. One of my jobs is in the developmental disabilities division here in the state, and it is one of the biggest concerns of parents of kids on the autism spectrum is what's going to happen to my child, even my adult child, if something happens to me.
Yes.
It's everyone's fear. Everyone's fear. It's talked about quite a bit. It's it's a little bit of a eye opener to get that life plan in place,
Yes, it's
and work
something we
on that.
need to work on.
Yeah,
Yes.
for the
Mhm.
support around that. So it's what an amazing testimony again to your triumph through something, whether that be who knows, I don't even think we can, it's way too soon to question what that whole thing was about.
Right.
I think it's so just we need to just bathe in the fact that you're okay and that you've got through it and that it was what it was. It's probably a medical thing more than anything else, not necessarily anything that happened to you for you.
Right.
That lesson is probably down the road somewhere. And so now your anxiety can relax and just
Yes.
understand that you're gonna do some personal journey work and find out what that is. And what if you're already doing all the things, then what is that one or two other things that you could be doing to prevent that? And this is the nurse coming out in me now, is I would offer you that now that you know. And
Correct.
so the
Yes.
good thing
Mhm.
is you can be watched. Now you can be watched by your physicians and um, a little bit more closely than so many people with strokes don't even know they have medical stuff, underlying things going on. That's the problem. Whereas TIAs are kind of a little bit of a beauty thing because then you're like, oh, okay, well, that's floating around in my body. I guess now I need to be a little bit more mindful. So that
Yes.
that makes me
Yes.
feel so wonderful that you're being watched um, and cared
Right.
for in
And
that way. Money wise, maybe
that's
we
a
need to
good.
do a GoFundMe for you or something. Geez, let's not worry about money. We need to take care of you. And
That's exactly what when they rolled me into the MRI, um, after two CAT scans
oh
and
God,
an echo and all the blood work and
yeah.
everything. In fact, they needed to do the IV through a sonogram because after
Oh,
three attempts, I'm like,
oh.
what? Now I got to pay for a sonogram.
Just to
But
start an IV.
yeah, it just so when I walked in there, I think I was trying to joke because
Mm,
I think you and I talked about this before that sometimes joking is a
mm,
coping mechanism. And I think
mhm,
I was joking with the woman who wheeled me into the MRI, and I just said, with everything I see dollar signs. She
mm,
says, "You are here for your health.
mm.
You need to stop worrying about money, and you need to focus on getting better."
Yeah,
And that can seem harsh,
yeah,
but it's true.
yeah.
It is true. And we'll work it, we'll work it out.
Mm-hmm.
It'll,
Mm-hmm.
it will work itself out, and
Mm-hmm.
work a few extra hours or whatever. Who knows when I'm going to get that bill, but
Right.
it'll work it out. It'll
Yeah,
work
yeah.
itself out when I get there.
Absolutely.
So
And prayer warriors are out here in the wings with you. So I think that's part of what that part of sharing your story is about too, that people can not only learn from your experience, but they can also be there for you in your experience because now you're on the other side of it
yes,
as
agreed.
well.
Yes. Dr. Hartwell asked some thought provoking questions that helped me see some areas of my life where anxiety was rearing its ugly head. But more than that, her guidance of the conversation allowed me to see some times where anxiety actually helped me get through a situation. And then other times where through my coping mechanisms, I was able to triumph over the adversity and the anxiety. I love that she saw the thread of triumph woven through my stories. It's a fantastic word. And sometimes it takes someone else listening to our stories to point out where we've triumphed because we're usually too close to the situation to see it ourselves. Dr. Hartwell, if you are hearing this or watching it on YouTube, thank you. I am grateful that you asked me to come on your show, but even more so, that you validated my triumphs in my traumas. We take two different approaches, but both Dr. Hartwell and I recognize the value in sharing and listening to each other's stories. It's one of the themes running through this podcast. I even say in my intro, your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. How can you share your story this week or allow someone else to share theirs with you? How will you put your warrior words into the world? Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.